¿Qué pasa a todos? Bienvenidos al canal y para mis suscriptores, bienvenidos de nuevo. Hoy escuchamos la canción Perro Fiel de la cantante colombiana Shakira con el cantante estadounidense Nicky Jam y hablaremos de lo que podemos aprender. Just a fair warning to you guys before we get started, I'm not going to be able to share this whole song with you guys just because of copyright issues, which is totally fine. A lot of the lyrics in this song, they do get repeated through the course of the song. I definitely recommend go check out the full music video with the link up top. It is a very good song, worth listening to the whole thing, but I'm going to start from the beginning. We'll take our first note and then we'll go from there, and I'll just skip ahead where I have to make sure we're focusing on what we can learn about the Spanish language. Okay, let's get into it.
Aquí estás, ya no puedes detenerte.
¿Dónde vas? Si estoy loco por tenerte.
¿Cómo lo ibas a ver? Que te vería otra vez.
Tú me confundes, no sé qué hacer.
Okay, so the first thing I want to point out real quick is where he says, no sé qué hacer. So he's saying, que with an accent over the E, which is what? It's the word for what when we're asking a question, when there's a lack of information about something and we want to know what the answer is. No sé qué hacer. I'll just point out real quick that hacer is left in the infinitive. Anytime that you're going to use an expression like this, you're going to always leave that verb in the infinitive. So if you want to say something like, I don't know what to say, you would say, no sé qué decir. In this case, he's saying, no sé qué hacer, because he doesn't know what to do. If he knew what to do and he wants to say, I know what to do, it's more common you're going to hear somebody say, sé lo que hacer. That lo que with no accent over it still means what, but it's not what in the terms of asking a question, but it's identifying what something is or what something does in a certain case. So you can say, sé lo que hacer, or you would say, no sé qué hacer. That's really going to be the best ways to use these here. And the other thing I just want to point out real quick before we move on is that phrase qué hacer, as in what to do. It actually has been shortened down into a phrase or into a word, quehacer, which is a word meaning chores or tasks. So when you're talking about what you have to do for chores or for housework, you know, cleaning up the house or doing errands or something like that, the word tarea is really common. You've probably heard that before, but quehacer is another really good one for that. So if you want to say, I have a ton of chores to do today, you could say, hoy tengo un montón de quehaceres. Okay, let's move on.
Yo lo que quiero es pasarla bien.
Yo tengo miedo de que me guste y que vaya a enloquecer.
Si eso pasa, yo seguiré contigo aquí como un perro fiel.
Yo tengo miedo de que me guste y que vaya a enloquecer.
Te hablo en serio, Mike, no estoy jugando. Tanto tiempo pasa en nada.
Okay, so just really quick with this one where he says, tanto tiempo pasa y nada. That word nada, which means nothing, is being shortened down to a single syllable where he's saying na. Now, this is something that you're going to encounter a lot in the Spanish-speaking world, especially in music where rhythm is so important. Nada is a really good example, becoming na. We've also got todo, which becomes to. We've got está, which becomes ta. We've got para, which becomes pa. There's lots of different examples of this where you're going to run into certain words that they're so commonly used all over the place in language that they oftentimes will get shortened down into a single syllable just for saving the breath, saving the time of saying them. Be aware of that as you go forward. Keep an eye out for them. And if you've run into any in the Spanish-speaking world that I didn't mention already, definitely drop it down in the comments below. I would love to see it, and I'm sure everybody else watching would love to know what else to keep an eye out for. Okay, let's move on.
Estas ganas no me aguanto y aunque tú me esquives, yo te sigo deseando. Dicen que tú eres peligrosa, no le hago caso a esas cosas.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about here is where he says, no le hago caso a esas cosas. So that phrase, hacer caso, can be literally translated to make a case for. But really what it's talking about is like paying attention to something or taking notice of something or just taking something seriously, like to heed somebody's words. And it's always going to be using an indirect object. So in this case, he's saying, no le hago caso a esas cosas. I don't pay attention to those things. This is a very useful phrase that you're going to want to keep in your toolkit. It's great if you get into an argument with somebody. You could say something like, ¿Por qué hiciste eso? Nunca me haces caso, which is, why did you do that? You never listen to me. Just keep that in mind going forward. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Dime qué está pasando, me tiene como un loco, soy un loco enamorado,
Quiero saber cuánto me vas a insistir y hasta dónde llegarías por mí. Siento mucho la espera, pero vale la pena cuando te esté besando.
Okay, so I want to talk real quick about where she says valdrá la pena. So she's saying it will be worth it. Valer la pena, or most commonly conjugated into the present to say vale la pena, is a very useful phrase for talking about something being worth it. Now, pena on its own usually means something like trouble or sorrow or pity or something like that. It's just a negative term for, you know, some sort of discomfort or issues that are brought about by some sort of problem that we've got in our life. So if you're talking with somebody and they give you some really bad news or they mention something horrible that happened to them, you could respond and say, qué pena. You're saying, oh, what a pity, what a shame. But in this case, vale la pena just means it's worth it. Or when it's conjugated into the future tense, valdrá la pena means it will be worth it. And I'll just point out real quick that valer, to be worth, is one of the only 13 verbs, aside from derivative verbs, that are irregular in the future tense. And I do cover every single one of those 13 verbs in my future tense video if you want to know how to say any verb that's irregular in the future tense in Spanish. So you can go check that out with the link up top if you're interested. All right, let's go ahead and move on.
De la manera que te mueves así, yo te lo juro me voy a derretir.
Tú sabes que soy buena, por más que yo te esquive, me sigues deseando.
Tú me confundes, no sé qué hacer. Yo lo que quiero es pasarla bien.
Yo tengo miedo de que me guste y que vaya a enloquecer.
Si eso pasa, yo seguiré contigo aquí como un perro fiel.
Yo tengo miedo de que me guste y que vaya a enloquecer.
Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about here real quick is where she says, tengo miedo de que me guste. So she's saying, I'm afraid that I'll like it. Now notice she's saying me guste and not me gusta. So she's using the subjunctive. Tener miedo de que is a subjunctive trigger. Now this is used to say what we're afraid of when we're afraid of something that might happen, something that could potentially happen in a certain hypothetical situation, but we're not sure that it's going to happen. It's not a sure thing, so we're using the subjunctive. We're talking subjectively about it with the lack of certainty. Now, there's another phrase which is used to say, I'm afraid that, which is going to be followed by the indicative mood, and that's temerse que. Now, temerse que, or me temo que in the yo form, is talking about what we're afraid that something is the case, something is definitely the case. It's used mostly when we're talking about giving bad news to somebody, telling somebody something that they don't want to hear. So me temo que is always going to be used with the indicative mood because it's talking objectively about something that we know to be the case. Whereas tener miedo de que is always going to be using the subjunctive mood because it's talking about something that we are not sure is going to happen, something that could happen. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Yo no pido nada extraordinario, solo un hombre de verdad. Que se tire por mí al barro, que cambie las bombillas hasta que me lave el carro. Quiero un tipo atento y cariñoso, pero que no sea muy celoso. Que en la calle sea un príncipe, pero que en mi cama sea salvaje y peligroso.
Puedes pedir lo que quieras de mí.
Okay, so this phrase lo que quieras is very useful. It's always going to use querer in the subjunctive mood. So in this case, it's being used with tú. You could also say lo que quiera if you're talking to somebody in the formal context. Lo que quiera usted, whatever you want. You could also say something like wherever you want. You could say donde quieras. You can say cuando quieras, to say whenever you want. So it's a great way of leaving the floor to somebody else to make a decision for you, to say do whatever you want. We'll do whatever you want. We'll go wherever you want. We'll do it whenever you want, but it's always going to use querer in the subjunctive mood. So just keep that in mind. Lo que quieras is a very useful phrase, and it can be used on its own. If you're talking with somebody on the phone and you're kind of going back and forth about, you know, whatever you guys are going to do, maybe for dinner or something like that, you can just say lo que quieras, whatever you want. Like, it's kind of like, I don't care. It's just whatever you want to make you happy. Okay, let's go ahead and move on.
Yo haría lo que fuera para ti.
Siento mucho la espera, pero vale la pena cuando te esté besando. Aquí estás, ya no puedes detenerte.
¿Dónde vas? Si estoy loco por tenerte.
Ok, amigos, pues eso es todo lo que les tengo para este video. Espero que les haya gustado y que hayan aprendido algo útil hoy. Muchísimas gracias por ver. Hasta la próxima. Chao.